I absolutely fell in love with Buenos Aires, but when I first got there, that wasn't necessarily the case. Today, I'm going to be taking you back to September of 2024, exactly 1 year ago, when I first arrived in Buenos Aires and I had no idea what to expect. Because man, my initial thoughts, I was freaked out. But has that changed now that I've had a year to think about it? Let's revisit exactly where I was right and where I was wrong for my first impressions of Buenos Aires. The first thought that comes to my mind is the taxi ride and the Uber ride down to Caseros, which is where I was going to be staying for my first week, right? That's not in the Capital Federal of Buenos Aires. It's actually just outside in the Provincia. And as you're leaving Ezeiza Airport, you know, it's quite a shock. But what was the most surprising for me is when you start to drive through some of the villas. Now keep in mind, I come from a beautiful suburban area of Ontario. All the houses are perfect, but driving through those villas is something that I've never ever seen in my life. And this is what made me think, like, guys, what have I gotten myself into? And then as we get off of the highway, we're stopped at a red light. And at the red light, there's a couple guys with, you know, who want to wash your windows or wash your cars or maybe selling some napkins or something like that, like they do at all the intersections. And the Uber driver, as soon as he saw them, as soon as we stopped, boom, locked the doors, closed the windows. And I thought, oh, like, are these guys like cartel? Are these guys out to get us? Should I hide that I have like a fanny pack, that I'm a tourist? This was obviously very, very much an exaggeration, but it was all coming in at the same time. All of these thoughts of, I have no idea what to expect, to seeing, you know, the buildings and the colorful villas, and then seeing these guys walking down the street and the Uber driver very clearly making sure that they like were not accessible to them. It was all such a massive shock. And not to mention, I forgot to mention that the roads, that people drive like maniacs. The lanes are optional, and if you can sneak into yourself into like a little area, they're gonna do that. So as a first impression, it was like just so much. It was so much coming in at once that I was just kind of sitting there accepting that I just need to wait for this moment to pass. Otherwise I'm gonna, you know, explode. But then we finally arrived in the streets of Caseros to my grandma's house. My uncle was there to receive me. My grandma was in there and they cooked us a whole bunch of pizzas. They were so excited to have us there. And this is when a couple of the memories started to flood back of when I was there 15 years ago. I remember the smells. I remember how the house felt. So despite everything being so crazily different, there was a little tiny bit of familiarity that was creeping in. So we ate a couple pizzas. We had, of course, the big gaseosa and then the big massive bottles of beer, which I guess they do 1 liter beers and everybody shares into their own cup. And this was a culture shock that was going to hit me later, like how everything is meant to be shared versus here in Canada, everything is individual, right? You order a thing at a restaurant, you each get an individual can. Or here, if you order something at a restaurant, they give you one big one and then you guys all pour into different cups. Those little tiny differences added up make for a huge different experience. So I continued getting used to the streets. I continued getting used to the house. Here's an example of my uncle showing the dog how to ride the skateboard. And that's also something else I wanted to bring up, is that there's stray dogs in the province. In the province, you have stray dogs running around, but you can tell that they're kind of smart, because if they were dumb, they'd be hit by cars. This guy, you let him out of the house and then he'll go, he'll have his fun, he'll do whatever he wants, and then he'll come back into the house whenever he wants to come back. And there's like a level of maturity, and not just the dogs, but in general, that we don't have necessarily here, because here we're so protected. It's like down there, only the smart dogs survive. Where here, you have a lot of really stupid dogs that are like, put them out in the wild for one day, they're done. So as you guys can tell, I got used to drinking mate, right? Mate became a huge part of my life, and I knew this was gonna happen. But if you take a look here, you can see that all the kettles there have a little mate setting, because the mate needs to be a certain temperature. I think it's like 77 degrees, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize that mate was like that integrated into society. And again, I would use this later on to actually learn how to integrate myself and adopt more of the Argentinian ways. Take a look at this picture and then take a look at the neighborhood I come from. I cannot tell you, just standing there, just existing in this area, that itself is a shock. And I'm not saying that this is a bad area. I'm just saying, look how different it is. The colors are different. Everything, like, I don't know. I'm used to this area, which was like perfectly designed. All the houses look the same. All the houses are well kept. You come here, all the houses are different. They were built at different times. They're all different colors. They're obviously a little bit older, more beat up, and it's just, it all comes together into one crazy, like, everything at the same time. Then we went to Kentucky's, my first time at Kentucky's. We asked for media lunas. They didn't have media lunas, so they gave us vigilantes, but this was my first experience with like the facturas that they have in Argentina. And oh my God, this right here was gonna be the end of me, because I showed up to Argentina as lean as you can possibly get. I was 165 pounds. I was probably approaching 10% body fat. And after a few months of living in Buenos Aires, after trying these facturas, I gained 15 pounds, lost the, Lost that leanness that I had. But we sat down at the Kentucky's here. We had a café con leche with our vigilantes or medialunas, whatever it was. We'd watch the people walking by, living their lives. I was starting to become a little bit more familiar with just the feeling of being there, with all the different types of people who were walking by. And I was starting to think, okay, this is Argentina. This is how people look, this is how people act, you know, I'm starting to get the hang of it. But what I didn't know was how different it would be from being in the province to going into the Capital Federal. Then my cousins invited me for a night out, and this kind of shocked me for the rest of my time in Argentina. I was told stories about how when you go to the boliche, you don't come home until 7 a.m. and I always thought that those were like kind of exaggerated. I was told how before going to bed, you'd eat breakfast, you know? You'd go to the boliche, then you'd have a café con leche with media lunas, and then you'd go home and go to bed. I thought it was kind of like comical. I thought it was exaggerated, and apparently I thought wrong because my cousins invited me out to the boliche. So this was the previa. This is where I saw my cousins. We had a couple stray dogs walking around. He says, "Vení gordo," which at the time, I didn't realize that gordo was a nickname that you can give basically anybody. Also, the guy in this video here, his name is Marcos, which is one of the first times I've ever met somebody with my name. Because here in Canada, it's typically Marcus, but no, this guy was Marcos. They called him Marquitos. This is where I started to realize as well that nicknames were a big thing in Argentina, that nobody actually got called by their real name. It was Marquitos, or it was all the short form, you know what I mean? All right, so we had the previa. They cooked like 100 different pizzas at the same time. Everybody was sharing the same drinks. And then we went out to the boliche. Now, at first, we were supposed to take a bus, and it was 2 a.m. or something. We were waiting for the bus in the dark province of Buenos Aires. At least I was with locals, so I wasn't too worried. But man, like I was so at their mercy. If they left me, I was done. There was no chance. I was done. So I was clinging on to them like my life depended on it, because being in the provincia, out in the province of a country that I didn't understand, in an area that to me was so foreign, man, that was something. And after we waited half an hour, the bus never actually came, so they ordered an Uber. But because there was too many of us, they called him and they said, "Hey, we have too many to fit into the Uber. Is that okay? Can we fit 4 of us into the back?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, no hay drama." So we all hop into the Uber, and it's a very old car. You will also find out very quick that the Uber X, the typical Uber in Argentina, are typically cars that just work. That's the baseline. They work. Once you go to an Uber Comfort, that means, you know, all the doors work, that they actually have AC. Where here in Canada, if you get an Uber Comfort, you get a huge, massive super SUV that's like a luxury car. Again, just differences that were like blowing my mind to start off with. But eventually, we showed up to the boliche. This was called Vox, right in the center, right near the obelisco. Now again, I didn't know where I was. I was completely at the mercy of the people I was with. If I wanted to leave early, I couldn't, because I just didn't understand the rules of the country yet. Right, if you look at this, for the first hour, for the first 2 hours, I was having a lot of fun. I was like kind of dancing. It was really warm in the thing, so we all took our shirts off, and that was fun for the first hour or 2 hours, you know? But once it hit like 4 a.m., I was ready to go. And then it was 5 a.m. and I was still ready to go. And then it was 6 a.m. and I was suffering. I was ready to die. I really wanted to leave, but I couldn't. I didn't know where I was. And then finally, at 7 a.m., when the sun was coming up, then the place closed. We all had to leave. We waited for a bus. We took the bus home. Everybody was like falling asleep on the bus like this. Me, I did my best to stay awake because, again, I didn't know where I was. I didn't want anything weird to happen. But then we finally got home, and I went to sleep, and I woke up at, I don't know, 3 p.m. the next day, or the same day. Again, shock. Just straight cultural shock. But then we had our very first asado. We went up onto the roof where they have a little bit of a workshop set up. You can see here that there's a grill. My uncle is cooking up some stuff, but the wood that we were using, we didn't necessarily acquire that wood from the store or from a tree or whatever. No, we walked around the streets and we picked up 2x4s and whatever we saw laying on the ground. We were like scavenging to try to find wood that we could use to make this asado. But let me tell you, I ate my first morcilla that day. We had some of the most unbelievable food on the rooftop of our house with wood that we scavenged from the streets. As you can see here, that's Raul. Raul is one of the neighbor's dogs, but whenever he sees that food is being cooked, he'll run over. He's like a mix of a pit bull and a dachshund, I think. And you can see he got covered here, which is pretty funny. Look at him. He's got no legs, but just straight pure muscle. Like that is the heaviest dog you'll ever like handle in your life. So here's the two of them just hanging out with us. And there's just a sense of like relaxation despite everything being so chaotic. The dogs were happy, we were happy, despite having like just look at them. It's so funny. Then I finally got to explore Recoleta, San Telmo, Palermo. We did a day where we went into the town to kind of get used to that. I started to notice the differences between the province and the city. The type of people you see walking around, it's a little bit more chaotic as well. Sometimes in the province, it can be a little bit quiet. It's neighborhoods. But once you get into the city, there's always stuff happening 24/7, no matter what. But we got to see a little free tango shows. We got to see the free San Telmo market where you walk around and buy stuff. Oh, and of course, all the pictures of Messi, all the mate. This was all the first time I was seeing all this. Now, of course, I got addicted to mate, as you guys can tell. But this was the first time I'm seeing this, a huge mural of Messi, Maradona in every corner, stands with 100,000 mates. It's like, this was like the fun type of culture shock, where before I was a little bit overwhelmed. This is where I started to see the beauty of what was actually going on around me. That the cultural aspect of the country, which is probably one of the most amazing parts of Argentina. This is where it really, really started to dawn on me that like I'm in a different world and I'm in for something amazing. Fast forward to eating another time at Kentucky. And now, as you can see here, the pizzas are unbelievable. This was something I noticed. The facturas were unbelievable. The asado, the meat, the morcilla, unbelievable. The pizza, unbelievable. All of the food I ate, every single piece was really, really, really good. Now, this could be because I have Argentinian taste buds from my mom, but I don't know. Like literally all the foods there are my favorite foods. This is the hat that I bought. By the way, this hat that I still have it here, I post on my Instagram all the time and people ask me all the time about this hat. Somebody sent me that they found it online for $74 and I bought it for 12,000 pesos on the San Telmo market. We were cooking on the roof and here comes Raul. Very funny. The soccer culture, one of the best saves that saved us at the World Cup, and then que mira bobo, which is a phrase that I start to hear a lot more. Now, because I wanted to become more Argentino, because I really, really wanted to fit into the culture, I said, you know what? Let me get the most Argentino haircut that I can possibly think of. And the picture you see on the screen right now is what I showed the barber, and that is what we accomplished. Right, another example of the food, the choripan. Oh my goodness, choripanaria and the San Telmo market. I went there probably once a week for my entire 6 months. It's probably where all of my money went. That's why I ran out of money, because I wanted to eat so much choripan because it was so damn good. Right, and I was getting accustomed to the culture. I finally had my mate. I was learning to make it. I was learning to share it with the people there. We stayed in the hostel for the first few weeks and I was hanging out with mostly foreigners, but it was a good way to still get accustomed. God. It was a good way to still get accustomed to what was going to be the rest of my 6 months living there. We went into Palermo, we went to the San Telmo at night, we started talking to people. The first instances of people getting their phones stolen, which was a very, very common topic, but I was ready for. Every weekend at this hostel, somebody said, oh yeah, I got my phone stolen. I went to the club, I was a little bit drunk, I came back without it. But that was actually something I was prepared for, so that didn't happen to me. By the way, my dad came to kind of help me get integrated. He showed me, he was there for 2 weeks. He showed me how to take the buses. He showed me the different areas. Thank you very much for doing that, because that saved me a lot of confusion and struggle. And then he also wanted to show me just the beauty of the food there. So we went to Fogon in Palermo, which is a Michelin star restaurant, and they gave us a big meat experience. Like, look at that. That is unbelievable. So as I mentioned, I wanted to become as Argentino as possible. I wanted people to look at me and think, yeah, that's an Argentinian guy. Like, so what? So I decided to get that insane haircut. I ended up going to one of the barbers, for which, by the way, significantly cheaper. Here I was paying $50 for a haircut, plus tax, plus tip. Down there, 9,000 pesos, which is like $9 US, plus tip, whatever, $10 US for a haircut. I was like, guys, I am gonna be the most well-kept person ever. Here in Canada, I wait a month. I try to wait as long as I possibly can because haircuts are so expensive, but they make me look at my hair now. Haircuts are so expensive here, I just decided to stop cutting my hair, but down there, it was unbelievable. Now again, I know it's all relative to salaries. Salaries are low, which means the services that people offer are often very cheap, but in comparison, it's all the same price. Anyways, haircuts were cheap. I went and I got my hair colored. Look at this. I got my hair bleached. I got reflejos in, and look at that. I was so excited. I was a completely different looking person. And truthfully, I accomplished what I wanted to do because people started to look at me different walking down the street. People, like before, I was giving off a little bit of like a touristic vibe just by the, I don't know, the way I looked, the way I was looking around. But once I got this haircut, people started to talk to me in Spanish 100% of the time. Where before it was like they were kind of testing the waters to see if I was an Argentinian or not. After this haircut, 100% of the time people would come up to me, speak to me in Spanish, and then once I was bumbling around with my Spanish, they were like, oh, this guy's a tourist. And then finally I moved into my apartment apartment, my Airbnb, which I was gonna stay for the next 6 months. And that is when I finally started to get accustomed. That's when I started to hang out with more locals. But I wanted to show you guys my first impressions, how everything turned out. It ended up being my absolute favorite place in the world. And now it is my goal to get back there, to move back down there, because the life that that city offers, Buenos Aires offers, there is just so much life. There's so much life. And eventually, as I started to get to know the city better, I realized it is safe. It's very, very, very safe, despite, you know, the different scenes, the different landscapes, the different like way that it looks. Unless you're an actual idiot and you walk into areas you're not supposed to walk into, or you're walking around with your phone up in the air saying, come steal this, then it's not bad at all. Literally nothing happened to me my entire time in Buenos Aires. I had 2 close calls, but one of them was outside of Buenos Aires. The other one was some opportunistic guys. I think they're expecting me to be some drunk tourist walking at night, but I was actually very aware of my surroundings. When I saw them approaching me, I ran, I got out of there. That's the only thing that ever happened. Like the safety that I was worried about. The safety that when I showed up to Argentina, I was told, oh, be careful, it's not safe here, it's not safe here. I thought that was gonna be my main concern, but that was not my main concern at all. My main concern is how can I make money while living there? How can I make American dollars or Canadian dollars while living there so that you can experience the best of both worlds, the life that Argentina offers, but actual decent salaries that other parts of the world offer. And eventually I discovered more about the sharing culture, about the people out in Buenos Aires. Eventually I started to hang out with more locals, and then the locals were showing me their friends, and I got a really good idea of what the culture was like. But I wanted to tell you guys my first impressions when I first arrived in Argentina 1 year ago. I was overwhelmed. It was chaotic. But once you find comfort in that chaos, it becomes one of the best places in the world, and I am dying to go back. And if you're somebody who is interested in Argentina, I am dedicating my life, my channel, to making Argentina a little bit more understandable for foreigners, for people who want to visit, people who want to live there. YouTube is going to recommend a video right here. Go click on that video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.